Okay, please take your seats quickly. Okay, thank you. Whilst everyone is taking their seats, I'll just start introducing this batch of papers. As indicated earlier, we would like to do our best to finish this evening. Apart from you getting the time off tomorrow, we would really like to give the interpreters, the translators, time off tomorrow. So batch number 3 has 5 working papers. Working papers 68, 93, 95, 298, and 229. The first working paper is working paper 68 by South Africa. And I'd like to invite South Africa to present.
Thank you, Chair. This working paper number 68 presents the need to update the Air Traffic Services Planning Manual, Doc 9426. This guidance material is currently the only Icao document that provides a guideline to the facilities and equipment required by air traffic services, including operational and structural related requirements. In addition, it also provides guidelines related to the overall organization of ATS to ensure that proper infrastructure is provided. Although commonly in use, this document was last updated in 1992. Accordingly, it does not reflect and provide guidance applicable to the technologies used in today's modern air traffic infrastructures. The current manual consists of the guidance material previously contained in various attachments to Annex 11, and that's the air traffic services, and procedures for air navigation services, air traffic management, that's the PENS ATM Doc 4444, and updated as necessary at the time to reflect latest developments, and also at the time new material concerning important aspects of ATS planning. Doc 9426 is currently the only Icao document that provides guidelines to the facilities and equipment required by air traffic services, including operational and structural related requirements. It also provides guidelines related to the overall organization of ATS. With regards to human resource requirements, the manual is currently the only document that provides the formula for calculating the number of controllers required to provide a specific service during the course of a year. Since its development in 1984 and last update in 1992, a lot of technological advancements have been made, and in its inclusion in an updated manual will assist decision makers in allocating the required resources and equipment to address the needs of a modern system. The manual also serves as the basis for bilateral and multilateral discussions aimed at the harmonization of planning activities on a regional scale, thus facilitating the development and updating of the regional air navigation plans under the umbrella of the Global Air Navigation Plan, which is a Doc 9750, the GAMP. In conclusion, it does not reflect the document as it stands does not reflect many of the latest operational aspects related to technologies used in today's modern ATM infrastructures. There is a need in the region for Icao to update and modernize the useful ATS guidance material as a matter of priority. South Africa would like to invite the conference to request Icao as a matter of priority to update the Air Traffic Services Planning Manual to include modern ATM infrastructure requirements, systems, and procedures. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, South Africa. Working paper 93, United Arab Emirates.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Business Continuity Management, BCM, has been identified by various states, organizations, and entities within and outside the domain of aviation in order to increase resilience and protect the business through a well-defined framework. By having a complete and independent system, which not only identifies but also puts in place the right measures for all types of risk, while considering the risk appetite of the organization within a state. BCM has the most comprehensive approach on aspects such as safety process impacts, operational impacts, legal impact, financial impact, reputational impact, and security impact. It is not possible to foresee every conceivable type of ANSP emergency number of agencies involved. However, it is important that the BCM plans are built in collaboration with airport and airspace users. Eurocontrol has published Eurocontrol guidelines for contingency planning of air navigation services. Also, Airports Council International has published ACI policy handbook that contains statements that airports should implement a BCM approach that compromise preventive measures, contingency measure, and business recovery measure. In accordance with national requirement and in order to increase resilience, the UAE General Civil Aviation Authority has launched a comprehensive project to establish and implement BCM system that includes ANSP. The conference is invited to agree on the following recommendations. Request Icao to consider the need for appropriate guidance material for ANSP BCM in order to define a globally harmonized approach. Encourage states ANSPs to further develop ANCP BCM plans in collaboration with relevant customers and stakeholders. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. The UAE is now invited to present working paper 95.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The United Arab Emirates presents Working Paper 95, which highlights the need for certification of air navigation service providers. The UAE considers air navigation service providers to be a critical part of aviation infrastructure and the safe management of airborne flights, and the efficient use of aerodrome infrastructure is reliant upon competent and effective air navigation service providers. The Convention on International Civil Aviation requires that contracting states shall provide airports and air navigation services in their territory, according to the standards set by the Convention and the annexes. The certification of aerodromes is required by Annex 14, and there is significant guidance on the matter in the Manual on Certification of Aerodromes. However, the certification of air navigation service providers is not specifically required, nor is there much guidance on the subject to enable states to implement a certification scheme when they desire to do so. It is evident from state oversight audits that those states that have implemented certification schemes for ANSPs obtain higher compliance with Icao standards and recommended practices. Therefore, there can be a direct safety benefit from the introduction of an ANSP certification scheme. In 2010, the UAE published regulations for ANSP certification requirements for each ANSP discipline: air traffic services, communications, navigation and surveillance, aeronautical information management, and meteorology. The ANSP certificate acts as the vital vessel to record and manage the validity of the ANSP organization's success at compliance to civil aviation regulations. A further improvement, which was recently introduced by the United Arab Emirates, was adding the regulatory requirement for any ANSP, which are subcontracted by the organization accountable for the provision of an ANS, which further strengthens the state's ability to enable effective regulatory compliance. We propose that the certification of ANSP organizations should be required within Annex 11 and be supported with guidance material regarding the implementation of effective ANSP certification processes. The conference is invited to request Icao to introduce guidance material and provisions as necessary to recommend certification of air navigation service providers. Such change will enhance states' compliance with Icao SARPs in the area of ANS and will provide assurance that ANSPs are equally compliant with Icao SARPs with an acceptable safety management system. Finally, the UAE believes that ANSPs are not less complex than airports nor airlines. We believe that they are all equal in complexity, importance, and their direct involvement and critical effect to aviation, safety, security, and efficiency of the air transport system. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. IATA is now invited to present Working Paper 298.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Air transport plays an essential role in providing aid and relief during and after a disaster occurs. Airlines have historically assisted in humanitarian relief activities and continue to play a significant role in the recovery activities after a situation is normalized. Therefore, the continuity of civil aviation during and after a disaster is essential, not only from an airline operation standpoint, but more importantly for the country recovering from disaster. Building on Assembly Resolution 3924 and ICAO's ongoing engagement with humanitarian relief agencies, IATA is presenting this paper to the conference to underline the importance of sustainable and resilient aviation infrastructure and to progress work undertaken by Icao related to disaster risk reduction. IATA's recommendations are included in Section 3.1 of this Working Paper 298. Thank you.
Thank you, IATA. May I ask the committee to show support for this Working Paper to be discussed? Thank you. IFATSIA is invited to present Working Paper 229.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and guests. Over the past several years, IFATSIA, along with Icao and CANZO, have worked together to include competency-based training and assessment for ATSEPs into the PANS training document 9868. Along with updating the PANS document, an additional document was created, document 10057, Manual on Air Traffic Safety Electronic Personnel Competency-Based Training and Assessment. These two documents provide air navigation service providers with guidance on how to structure their approach to training and assessment of ATSEPs. Over the past 2 years, Icao, IFATSIA, IFATCA, and CANZO hosted an ATSEP and ATCO competency-based training workshop at each of Icao's 7 regional offices. During the ATSEP portion of the workshop, we found many questions were directed toward basic training component, such as, how long should basic training take? What are the ANSPs doing to meet basic training objectives? And most importantly, is basic training mandatory? Based on our experiences, and for the benefit of all, we believe that the successful achievement of ATSEP basic training objectives as listed in the PANS 9868 and document 10057 should be mandatory for all member states. The completion of these basic training objectives provides the underpinning knowledge for all ATSEP training, builds the foundation and understanding of the local and global impact of the work that ATSEPs perform, provide harmonization for all ATSEP or all ANSPs basic training and basic competencies, provide ATSEPs with a sense of inclusion in the global aviation community, as many are currently feeling left out. The requirement for ANSPs to implement the basic training should not be seen as a burden to member states. In most cases, implementation should be minimum. In some cases, all that may be required is validation of existing training. IFATSE intends to provide support for its members regarding basic training. A development team is already working on a syllabus to support the basic training objectives outlined in the 10057 manual. Currently, ATSEPs do not fall under Annex 1, and member states' air navigation service providers are not regulated in the content of the training that they are providing. There is no requirement for ATSEPs to be licensed, but there is a requirement for ATSEPs to be competent, and as stated, the completion of basic training provides the underpinning knowledge of all ATSEPs. With this paper, IFATSE is not looking for licensing of ATSEPs. We are proposing to harmonize training for ATSEPs. ATSEPs work in a high-impact, high-consequence safety business. It is our responsibility that they have a firm understanding of the work they perform, and this is an important step towards ensuring ATSEP competencies. The work an ATSEP performs is life-critical. I'd like to notify the Assembly that over the past few days, we have heard these terms: SWIM, air traffic flow management, trajectory-based operations, advanced levels of automation, digital towers. These terms are the future for creating an efficient, safe flow of air traffic. ATSEPs are key contributors to the installation, maintenance, and ensuring integrity of the systems providing the data for an efficient and safe air traffic flow management. The conference is invited to support the requirement for all ATSEPs to have a successful completion of all basic training objectives as listed in the PANS 9868 and the 10057. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, IFATSE. I invite the committee to show support for this working paper to be discussed. Thank you. Now invite the Secretariat to provide any clarification on these papers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll start at Working Paper 68. This is a 35-year-old document, the ATS Planning Manual. I would say that a good percentage of it is not necessary anymore because actually it was moved from being guidance material to become provisions in the PANS ATM. This might be mark number technique, quite a variety of things, including reduced runway separations. So I'm just wondering, when you're discussing Working Paper 68, do not hinder the ability of Icao to produce guidance material or assistance in supporting Icao provisions to specifically updating a particular manual. There are options now where we can use the internet and we can use websites and we can do all forms of mechanisms or modern mechanisms now for teaching and advancing guidance for states, and we've already started progressing that, and in a couple of situations we actually update guidance material in real time. The focus should be that the important items that remain in the ATS planning manual that is important to you are not lost. On top of that, are there areas where Icao needs to provide guidance? That's Working Paper 68. In respect to Working Paper 93 that calls for a specific business continuity framework, and I guess to a certain extent this supports Annex 11 contingency arrangements and Annex 19. There's significant information on business continuity outside of Icao, and the question would be the extent that Icao needs to provide additional information or alternative information for one specific mechanism, recognizing there are actually many. Moving on to Working Paper 298. You will recall that with respect to crisis management, this subject has already been raised by the discussion on working paper 40. I'd also like to recall that Icao has developed a business case for the value of continuity of civil aviation through disasters, and the industry high-level group, an initiative of the Icao Secretary General, produced the 2017 Aviation Benefits Report and an associated checklist document which address this. It may be mentioned, of course, that this work is available on the Icao public website via the No Country Left Behind webpage. In terms of certification of ATM systems and service providers, states have moved to a situation where air traffic services are provided by an organisation separate from the state body responsible for the regulatory function. However, it remains the state that is responsible for ensuring compliance with, amongst other Icao provisions, Annex 19. Some states have already undertaken certification of ANSPs, sometimes to facilitate their regulatory oversight. Accordingly, the Secretariat is mindful of the costs incurred with any change to existing state regulations that work within Icao may cause. I think we should be aware that this is not an insignificant undertaking. Regarding Working Paper 229, this refers to the need for requirements for ATSEP competency-based training and assessment, and the paper made reference to Doc 10057, which is quite a new document. As with some of the other items that we have talked about today, this is already within the work program of Icao, and there is a task force concerned with developing this material. And when any task force or panel, expert group develops guidance material, there is always the offering that there may need to be requirements. And so certainly the Secretariat supports the idea that this working paper would be passed to that particular group. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Secretariat. The floor is now open for discussion. Cameroon.
Merci.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon, everybody. Cameroon supports Working Paper 68, presented by South Africa, because since 1992, certainly a lot has changed in terms of the provision of air traffic services, in particular the introduction of new technologies. And so there is a need for an in-depth review of Document 9426 so as to ensure that it is up to date and commensurate with the modern needs. It would also be good to make sure that work is done together with ATS experts and CNS experts so as to ensure that nothing is overlooked. Cameroon also supports Working Paper 229 by IFATSIA. The work performed by the equipment maintenance technicians on CNS needs to be given due recognition, and to that effect it would be good for Icao to introduce a support mechanism for states through the regional offices that would serve to give an objective assessment of ATSEPs and boost their skills in view of the major role that they play in the provision of air navigation and air traffic services and also aeronautical MET services. So it would be good if ATSEPs could be given the licenses like other providers. And with regard to implementation of the training program, that too warrants support from the regional offices. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Cameroon. Greece?
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon to all. I would like to express our support to the Working Paper 93 presented by United Arab Emirates. Continuity and contingency planning is of paramount importance in aviation system. The resilience of critical services shall be ensured by mitigation plans. That is the case of the Aviation Crisis Coordination Cell, which has been established in Europe. Furthermore, at network level, guidance on different kinds of risk has been developed that is addressed to all stakeholders, states and operational units. So, it can be taken into account by them when they develop continuity and contingency plans. Furthermore, I take the advantage of having the floor to express our support to Working Paper 95, also presented by United Arab Emirates, which refers to the requirement for certification of all air navigation providers. We strongly support the air navigation service providers to hold valid certification. It's an enhancement of compliance with direct safety, performance and resilience benefits. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Greece. Oman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good evening to all. Oman supports working papers 93 and 95 presented by UAE, and we thank them for the efforts exerted to present these two, develop and present these two working papers. We believe that the recommended certification process will provide a structured approach to identify and address gaps, if any. And Oman notes the information contained in working paper 229 presented by IFATSIA. We believe that the conclusions are in line with document 157 and will streamline the ATSIB profession qualification. It's vital that we recognize the role played by the ATSIB in the safety of aviation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Saudi Arabia?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Saudi Arabia support UAE Working Paper 93 related to the need to develop appropriate guidance material for air navigation service provider business continuity, BCM. Saudi Arabia also appreciate United Arab Emirates Working Paper 95 related to the certification of ANSP, as the certification of ANSP is seen as the best way to ensure that ANSP is compliant with the regulatory framework and to monitor the level of compliance. We would like to support the recommendation on this paper, mainly bullet B, requesting Icao to introduce guidance material and provisions as necessary to recommend certification of air navigation service provider. Mr. Chairman, Saudi Arabia also support the recommendation of Working Paper 68 presented by South Africa, and in particular bullet A. Moreover, Saudi Arabia is supporting the amendment of this document and to include remote and digital, as was proposed by UK during the discussion of the topic in the last session. Thank you.
Thank you. Denmark?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, all. Denmark would like to speak in support of working paper number 68 from South Africa. We recognize and support the need for regions to have an updated document providing guidance to facilities and equipment required, as well as operational and structural requirements, and taking into account of developments since the last revision in 1992, as well as available industry standards. Examples of those such developments since 1992 are many, as we all know: performance-based navigation, digitalization of air traffic services, ADSB, to mention only a few. The technological and operational development since 1992 should in itself be sufficient to warrant an update of the planning manual. However, yet another argument to warrant such an update is the manual's content and structure, which is unique and a very useful tool for training organizations and even CAAs in their training of ATS personnel. For the reasons mentioned, we support the recommendations of revised version number 1 of Working Paper 68. Having said that, Mr. Chairman, I would like to note that we heard and understood the Secretariat message regarding Working Paper 68. Regardless of that, it's still our opinion and let's say, position that it's an essential document which is necessary for the reasons mentioned in my intervention. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Denmark. Japan?
Thank you, Chairman. So Japan fully support the working paper 229 presented by Icao. So since the ATFM plays a significant role for technical operation and engineering work of safety critical CNS ATM infrastructures, so the regulatory framework for training and assessment and certificate of competency for ATFM should be implemented by the global standards. So therefore, Japan is confident that the implementation of the competency-based basic training for ATFM would turn out to have been truly worthwhile for the safe, secure, and efficient air navigation services. Thank you.
Thank you, Japan. IFATCA?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. IFATCA supports Working Paper 68 presented by South Africa and its proposal to review document 9426. This document is the only comprehensive Icao document that provides guidance for implementation or the upgrade of facilities and equipment required by air traffic services. It also provides guidance related to the overall organization of ATS to ensure that a proper infrastructure is provided in the most appropriate form for a particular state. The Icao initiative of No Country Left Behind has increased efforts to improve implementation in all regions. A comprehensive review and update of the ATS planning manual would be of great assistance in supporting this important Icao initiative. We do suggest, however, that with respect to recommendation A in the revision 1 of the paper, that the task is allocated to the group of experts that is deemed most appropriate by Icao. Mr. Chairman, IFATCA also supports Working Paper 95 by the United Arab Emirates. IFATCA considers that ANSP certification would greatly benefit aviation safety and efficiency. Similarly to air operators, aircraft maintenance organizations, and aerodromes, which are certified, certification of ANSPs would ensure that the required level of performance and compliance is achieved and maintained, as well as it would allow for more proactive detection of possible areas of improvement. At present, many states have developed their own certification scheme, yet there is very limited guidance available on the topic to inform other states that wish to implement such certification process. As the aviation industry is becoming more complex, and given the associated growth in traffic seen in the past years, guidance and harmonization of oversized and ultimately certification of ANSPs is paramount to support the outstanding level of safety and efficiency aviation has been able to achieve. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Singapore?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Singapore supports Working Paper 93 by the UAE, which calls for Icao to consider developing appropriate guidance material for ANSP Business Continuity Management, BCM, and also urges all states to develop ANSP BCM plans in collaboration with relevant customers and stakeholders. Singapore notes that Annex 11 to the Convention on International Civil Aviation requires air traffic services authorities develop and promulgate contingency plans for implementation in the event of disruption or potential disruption of air traffic services and related supporting services in the airspace for which they are responsible for the provision of such services. The development of an ANS business continuity framework and ANSP BCM guidance material would supplement and further enhance states' contingency plans to ensure timely, harmonized, and appropriate responses to events that result in disruption to the provision of air traffic services and provide a greater degree of certainty for airspace and aerodrome users during contingency operations. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Council.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. CANSO thanks the UAE for Working Paper 95. We are aware that a number of ANSPs have already undergone certification because some states already require it. We are also aware that other states approve, accept, or even conduct the provision of ATS themselves as a branch of the regulator. Among others, the EU ANSPs are already subject to certification in accordance with EU law, but other regions are not yet there. For those ANSPs that have undergone certification and need to recertify due to any new Icao provisions will result in additional costs, as it will for states that would need to amend their existing regulations on the same topic. Further, we have to consider that ANSPs are already regulated, for example, to have an SMS approved by the state regulator. So while the way forward may indeed be to develop certification SARPs for ANSPs, it is necessary that when investigating the potential advantages of certification, we balance the benefits achievable through effective implementation of existing provisions. Further, we have to be mindful of the cost incurred by doing so, as stated also before by the Secretariat. CANSO believes that any change in Annex 11 should be high level only, and detailed content could then be added to PEN's ATM Doc 44. Also would like to recommend to comment on Working Paper 229 by IFATSIA. As IFATSIA stated in their presentation, CANSO work very closely with them on the training of ADCEPs together with ADCOs. For this Working Paper 229, however, CANSO cannot fully support it. CANSO notes Action A, but as far as Action B and C are concerned, we object for the following reasons. Firstly, CANSO considers that the proposed Action B and C undermine and question the resolution of Assembly 39, which clearly stated that at the moment Icao does not see the need for mandatory harmonization of ADCEP qualification, competencies and training. Further proposals also undermine and question the work that has been done by the Icao Competency-Based Training and Assessment Task Force to date. It was decided by the task force that only 2 Annex 1 licenses that require mandatory competency-based training and assessment will be multi-pilot crew license and the remote pilot license. All other licenses and non-licensed ATSEPs are not mandated to use this methodology of training and assessment, and for these categories it was decided to leave it optional. This is reflected in the proposed amendments to Annex 1 and PEN's Training Doc 9868, which went for public comments as a state letter only earlier this year. These amendments are planned for implementation in November 2020, and following the Icao process, it is now too late and inappropriate to change them so radically now. Secondly, Proposal C to designate certain elements of Doc 10057 as mandatory contradicts the current version of this document, where elements are presented as recommended and are subject to adoption by states, ANSPs, training organizations, etc. Doc 10057 is the lowest denominator of the guidance material and is designated in support of PEN's training, which in turn is a guidance material for Annex 1. Since ADCEPs are excluded from Annex 1 and are not categorized as licensed personnel, for them PEN's training at the moment is a top-level regulation covering training and competency requirements as far as Icao regulations are concerned. Guidance material cannot be mandated until this is required by a higher level document. Currently, and in the proposed amendment to PEN's training, there is a clear statement at the beginning of the chapter dedicated to the general provisions of competency-based training and assessment for air traffic management personnel, which reads, "This chapter outlines the requirements to be met in order to implement competency-based training and assessment for air traffic management personnel. Implementation of such training, however, is optional." Third, and sorry I speak so long, the rationale provided by this working paper relies heavily on the fact that a number of the implementation workshops for competency-based training and assessments were delivered by Icao at regional offices. It states that the purpose of the workshops was to provide guidance for the implementation of competency-based training and assessment for ATSEPs and ATCOs. But this misses the point that it was in fact guidance only for those states, ANSPs and training organizations who decided to exercise their option as per Annex 1 and PAN's training to use this methodology. This provision was clearly stated at every workshop, and it was one of the key statements. If these proposals are allowed to go ahead in violation of the issues just outlined, that would set a dangerous precedent that would be able to bypass SARPs, which designate the same elements as recommended or optional, but not mandatory. Finally, and fundamentally, the proposals in item C calls for prescriptive and regimented regulations, which is in stark contrast with some papers submitted by other organizations, which calls for less prescriptive, more flexible and more performance-based regulations. CANSO supports the drive to reduce the burden of over-prescriptive regulations in favor of more dynamic and flexible regulations. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, CANSO. Iceland?
Thank you, Chair. Iceland fully supports IATA's Working Paper 298. Climate change will bring more disruptions, and we need to ensure the resilience of the system. We find IATA's proposals to be in line with the approach that has already been promoted by other states this morning, and which we support, of a global network vision based on a network of interlinked regions. Thank you.
Thank you. Nigeria?
Thank you, Chairman. Nigeria supports Working Paper 95 presented by UAE on certification of ANSP, while taking note of the clarification offered by the Secretariat. We believe this will add value to efficiency of the ATM system, and considering the fact that many states already have that provided in their regulations, as well as already embarking on certification of ANSP. Nigeria also wishes to support the Working Paper 68 presented by South Africa, and support the need for the review of the planning manual, document 9426. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ayata?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On behalf of IATA, I would first like to start by extending our support to Working Papers 68, 93, and 95. In addition, and if I may, with regards to the comments made by the Secretariat regarding the documents that were referred to and that cover the recommendations, we believe that especially little d in the recommendation in our paper is not covered in the documents referred to, and therefore the request to work together with all stakeholders is important to ensure the continuity of civil aviation through disasters. So we respectfully request the conference to return this recommendation in its deliberation moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Ayata. Colombia?
Gracias. Thank you, Chair. We thank the UAE for submitting WPs 93 and 95, which we support, as well as WP 229 from ITFACIA, since there is a need for pooling best practice, which has been successful in ATS systems, and apply them to others, in this case electronics personnel staff, which will have a uniform system harmonizing the various services in terms of aviation safety. Thank you.
Thank you, Colombia. United Arab Emirates?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. UAE supports Working Paper 68, and we note the comments made by the Secretariat, and we appreciate all Icao efforts in this regard. I would like to thank all the states who supported our working papers, in particular Greece for being very supportive, I plan for my next vacation to be to the beautiful islands of Greece. We do support Working Paper 298. We believe it complements UAE Working Paper 93. And we also support Working Paper 229 by IFATSIA. ATSEP is an implementation in UAE. And either I did not fully understand Council's intervention or I'm not supporting it. But I think the working paper of IFATSIA is very supported by the UAE as it stands. Thank you.
Thank you, UAE. United Kingdom?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With regards to Working Paper 68, the UK fully supports this. However, we do note the comments and appreciate the comments made by the Secretariat in this regard. Despite its advanced age, the planning manual contains an abundance of valuable material relating to the planning and running of an ATS organisation, but it is seriously out of date, having last been revised over 25 years ago. Consequently, some fundamental aspects of today's ATM environment, such as PBN, civil-military coordination, cooperation, and as mentioned in a previous discussion, remote ATS, do not feature, nor do newer issues such as RPAS operations. These are facts of ATM life and will challenge states for the foreseeable future. So it's our view that 9426, which is of great value to many states and across all regions, cannot remain in such a state of obsolescence. And we believe that Icao should undertake a complete update of the document to reflect the latest standards and developments in aviation, notwithstanding the Secretariat's comments, of course. The scope of such a review should lead to the development of a broad, high-level document providing basic information to planners that could be used as a central reference, pointing to Icao documents and circulars that would still be expected to provide detailed guidance. An updated manual should therefore provide a high-level overview with references made to the detailed material elsewhere within the Icao lexicon, showcasing existing Icao resources necessary for planning or enhancement of an air traffic service provider. Finally, Icao should, as part of any update of 9426, consider the means by which updated content is delivered to the end user. As GAMP is now available, via a web-based platform, so the ATS planning manual could be treated in the same way. That said, and mindful of the comments made by Australia earlier in the week, pointing to the need to retain a printable GAMP, so a printable version of a revised 9426 could be made available. With regards to Working Paper 229, we agree with the principle that ATSEPs must be qualified and competent. We note the IFATSIA comments, however, regarding licensing in Annex 1 and agree that Annex 1 change is not appropriate. It would appear premature to consider the unilateral incorporation of ATSEP into the Annex without due consideration of other personnel. Rather, it would appear more appropriate to consider at some point the need to review the scope and purpose of aeronautical licensing contained within Annex 1. This would be a more holistic course of action to take, but in advocating that course, we are not stating that a review of Annex 1 is necessary at this point. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, United Kingdom. Jamaica?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, colleagues. Most of the discussions regarding Working Paper 93 and Working Paper 298, Jamaica supports. This is against the background as small Caribbean states we have seen over the last decade where we have been impacted severely by hurricanes and other phenomena. These situations adversely affect the capability of most states in terms of their business continuity and also in terms of their ANS and ATM infrastructure. As such, Jamaica strongly supports these two documents and believe that more should be done in terms of the support for small island states in the development of their business continuity plan and also in terms of their sustainable and resilient aviation infrastructure. With regards to working paper 98, working paper 95, Jamaica also supports the implementation or the request to introduce guidance material for ANS certification. This is against the background that small states are required in some parts of the Caribbean to be certified. And what we find absent is clear guidelines that we can look at and coalesce around as a Caribbean in terms of what needs to be done. So we believe that it's important that the Icao introduce this guidance material. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Given the comments, there are a few more comments that persons want to make. Given the time, it seems as though we may be back here tomorrow morning. If the comments you wish to make, you believe have already been made, because I've heard repeated comments on several of the items, we can actually sum up now so that we can get into the other batch. Given that, is there anyone believe that they have a comment to make that was not made? Thanks. I see a second.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, sir. This is a document on 68 from South Africa. We would join those previous speakers who have highlighted the importance of updating this document. We've taken on board the comments of the Secretariat with respect to taking into account the provisions in this manual in PAN's ATM, but until it's been withdrawn from the list of Icao documents, you'll understand that it stands today as an essential planning document at the available of states and ANSPs. So we really would like to support South Africa's paper. Thank you.
And I'll take a final comment from Netherlands.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I noticed that there were several comments made on working paper 229, and I just would like to express our support for the intervention made by the United Kingdom on this working paper. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you. The committee agreed that there was a need for in-depth review of the ATS planning manual and indicated this is already on the work program of Icao, on the active work program of Icao. The committee noted a number of options regarding business continuity management was available to states. However, the committee also placed value on guidance from Icao on business continuity for states, including small island states. On the other hand, support was given for provisions and guidance material and certification for ATM systems and ATS providers. On the other hand, many systems and providers were already well regulated, and the concern was expressed the cost that could be incurred. In my view, it would appear appropriate that Icao investigate the potential benefits balanced against cost of certification taking into account budgetary implications. Sufficient support from the committee was received to forward working paper 229 to the appropriate expert groups. There was support for sustainable and resilient aviation infrastructure and the value of post-contingency event reviews. Noting existing best practice, the committee acknowledged the benefits of the inclusion of all stakeholders, both within the aviation community and beyond, to ensure a regionally coordinated approach to the development and continued efficacy of such plans, and advocated that Icao facilitate such an approach. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Given the time, and we would have to ask the indulgence of the interpreters to carry on, what I'm going to ask, first of all, is how we have 3 working papers. We would need very brief presentations from the presenters, and I would like to ask a show of hands how many persons may need to speak during the discussions.
That's okay.
Okay. Yeah. So thank you. We're hoping that we can wrap this up in about 15 minutes. So this last batch of working papers are working papers 114, 115, and 245. I'd like to ask Canada to present working paper 114.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Working paper 114. With the switch from analog to digital aircraft systems, magnetic variation discrepancies have and will continue to cause operational errors in PBN procedures, CAT 2-3 auto-coupled approaches and landings, and AIRAC 424 coding for all course and heading legs. Procedures are designed with reference to true north and converted to magnetic. Most large aircraft use inertial reference units and flight management systems that complete calculations using true north and add magnetic variation values from tables to display information to pilots. Air carriers, air navigation service providers, and avionics original equipment manufacturers spend millions annually managing magnetic variation. Technology available today has rendered the use of a magnetic reference system obsolete, increases ANSP and aero operator costs, and introduces aircraft tracking instability where minor to moderate magnetic variation differences exist. The conference is invited to agree to the recommendations in 3.6 of the body of the paper.
Thank you. Requesting 115, Canada to present 115.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will attempt to be brief again. This paper presents 4 emerging phraseology safety issues that stem from the evolution of global aviation procedures. The rapid evolution of certain aviation aspects, and more specifically the collateral effects on air traffic controller pilot communication, must be safely and efficiently managed. This is specifically important because of the level of gravity errors may carry to the system. In this light, one of the key elements of any deployment in an operational context is how it relates to communication. The asynchronous evolution of the global air navigation system has sometimes made it difficult to pinpoint and address specific communications issues linked to that evolution. This fast progression often creates a void where there is a lack of Icao standard phraseology or there is inadequate harmonization between old and new means of communication. This, in turn, often puts the lack of reliable communication difference tracking processes in the spotlight. Additionally, the excess burden linked to the aforementioned challenges is not mitigated by an improvement in operational communications training and quality assurance processes required for ATS and pilot workforce. Operational communication threats will only be exacerbated by the different advances if they aren't specifically addressed.
Okay, thank you. And now I ask Ukraine to present working paper 245.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am pleased to present working paper 245 on air traffic management aspects within Simferopol and Dnipro flight information regions on behalf of Ukraine. Ukraine strongly supports Icao's adherence to ensure safety, security, and efficiency of international civil aviation and considers that strict observance of the Convention on International Civil Aviation and its annexes, Icao documents, is of utmost importance for all Icao member states, with stakeholders of aviation community in the modern, challenging environment. The working paper presents two main aspects relating to the conflict zones airspace management and the necessity of Icao member states to observe provision of the Chicago Convention and its annexes to exclude a significant reduction of efficient airspace utilization as well to avoid potential risk for flight operations. Ukraine has its own considerable experience related to conflict zones airspace management within the sovereign airspace. Item 2.3 of the working paper gives information about measures applied by Ukraine to protect civil aircraft operation in strict accordance with Convention on International Civil Aviation, its annexes, Icao docs, and lesson learned. We also believe it is important when state transparently provides information relating to conflict zone. We would like to thank Icao for publishing the second edition, Icao doc 10084, Risk Assessment Manual for Civil Aircraft Operation, Other or Near Conflict Zone. This document reflects Ukraine proposal regarding measures to protect civil flight operation presented during the 39th General Assembly. The item 2.4 of the working paper gives information about situation relating air navigation services provision, flight information, flight operations, and safety issues over high seas of Simferopol FIR, where, according to the European Air Navigation Plan, Ukraine is responsible for the air traffic services provision. Additionally, the working paper informs about efforts made by Ukraine in order to resume normal flight operation in the high seas airspace over Black Sea, as well on international level, existing obstacle for resumption of normal flight operation, and suggestion for the way forward. Therefore, the conference is invited to support Ukraine's efforts specified in paragraph 3, in particular with regards to the state's strict adherence to the Chicago Convention and its annexes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ukraine. Any clarifications from Secretary?
My clarifications are included to this time limit discussion. The easiest one is working paper 115 is already on the active work program of an expert group. Regarding working paper 114, regarding to True North, this subject was previously raised at the 12th Air Navigation Conference. The conclusion at that conference was that states were asked who were interested in this matter to conduct technical and operational impact assessments, as well as estimate the cost of the proposed change. This working paper, 114, does not introduce either in any detail. It is proposed by the Secretariat that rather than agreeing to adopt now that pending these detailed studies being completed, this subject be held in abeyance. Regarding the subject of the Simferopol FIR in working paper 245, some of you may be aware that the 5th meeting of the Black Sea Task Force met on the 5th of September in 2018, this year, in Paris. It was agreed at this meeting that there was a need for a continuous and constructive dialogue within the framework of the Black Sea Task Force to continue to explore potential solutions for the normalization. It is noted that resumption of normal operations on the 4 existing routes could be a first step towards the normalization of flight operations per this task force's terms of reference. And this step was also important to help to ease the traffic flows, capacity, and ATC workload issues in the adjacent FIRs, especially in view of the ongoing airspace optimization projects in a variety of areas, and I would also like to note the opening of the new Istanbul airport. The meeting reaffirmed its commitment to cooperate to ensure safety of flight operations in the high seas airspace over the Black Sea, and to refrain from any actions that might directly or indirectly affect the safety of operations. The ENPG meeting, the 60th, in November 2018, will be presented with this task force report and may consider further actions, potentially including the detailed identification of all current constraints concerning the use of 4 ATS routes and the potential mitigation measures, and potentially convening the next meeting in the spring of 2019. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I now open the floor for discussion. Okay, thank you, Council. And again, I remind, please keep all interventions brief.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, we'll keep it as brief as possible. Council supports in principle Working Paper 114 as mentioned in the Working Paper, removing the obligation to continuously refresh aeronautical information predicated upon variable attributes would bring about efficiencies and reduce maintenance cost. Indeed, such a change should be considered not only in respect to Annex 4, but also for all other annexes stating a requirement to publish magnetic values. However, we also note that the transition from magnetic to true north would be complex with many changes to procedures required. For example, the alignment of VORs and the associated conventional navigation procedures that would need to be updated and could be costly. Although there is less of an issue for PBN approaches, conventional approaches will be in use for many years. The 2030 timescale seems very challenging in that respect. In this light, we would like to propose, as the Secretariat stated, that prior to a decision being taken, Icao conducts a feasibility study identifying cost benefits and the transition impacts. Thank you.
Thank you. Sweden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sweden would like to short comment on Working Paper 245 presented by the delegation from Ukraine. Sweden notes with concern the information from Ukraine about the situation in Simferopol and the Dnipro flight information regions. The safety of civil aviation is an issue of utmost importance, and any measure which puts safety at risk must be strictly avoided. Sweden therefore stresses the importance of adherence to the Chicago Convention and its annexes as put forward by Ukraine in the Working Paper 245. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Denmark.
Thank you, Chairman. Noting the Secretariat's comment on Working Paper 114, we do acknowledge the challenge described in the Working Paper. The paper quite accurately describes the issues associated with the magnetic north reference system compared to the true north reference system, in particular considering evolution of navigational capabilities driven by the development from analog or to a digital aircraft technology. We do support the goals set out in the paper. The suggested time frame, however, should be decided upon once all relevant aspects of such a major change have been thoroughly examined. Icao, in our opinion, should lead such a change. We therefore propose that the matter be referred to a study group or an Icao panel and further analyzed, including a detailed end-to-end impact assessment and consideration of the transition planning aspects. Thank you.
Thank you. ICCAI.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will be short. We support Council proposal with regards to Working Paper 114. Thank you.
Thank you. IFATCA.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief as well. IFATCA supports Working Paper 115 presented by Canada. It is our view that globally harmonised phraseology is a key enabler to the safety objectives we all strive to achieve. IFATCA considers robust and regular training programs for both air traffic controllers and pilots to be the foundation of the consistent application of standardised phraseology. Any proficiency requirements should be supported by a strong competency-based training framework, since an effective training program will naturally support improvements in phraseology proficiency. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. United States?
Chair, noting the earlier comments of the Secretariat in Sweden regarding paper 245, the United States urges all states concerned and the Icao Secretariat to work together and use all necessary means to support the normalization of the flight operations within the airspace over the Black Sea as soon as practical. Thank you.
Thank you. United Kingdom?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With regards to Working Paper 115, we support this paper in principle, but we see the development of phraseology continuing principally in the context of PAN's ATM, and consequently don't support the proposal for a standalone PBN phraseology manual. We believe this would fracture Icao's delivery of radio telephony requirements. Instead, we support the continued use of Annex 10 Volume 2 and PAN's ATM as the core radio telephony publications, supported by Doc 9432, the radio telephony manual, which can serve or continues to serve as the catch-all one-stop shop for all phraseology users. Each would, of course, continue to be supplemented by Doc 10037, the Global Operational Data Link Manual, in respect of data link communications. Thank you.
Sorry,
yeah.
2-minute intervention.
Yeah. We at 5:13, and the interpreters would need to wrap up at 5:15. And so what's being proposed here is that we would continue this item at 2 o'clock tomorrow when we resume tomorrow, before the reports. And so we'll continue discussion at that time. Okay, so thank you. We are adjourned until 2 p.m. tomorrow.
Nice try, mate.